Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of my mid-year wrap-up. So the other books I talked about in my other video in part 1 was a mishmash of all sorts of different books. Books I liked, books I loved, and books that were just meh. It's definitely been a lot of up and downs with reads this year, but I was really excited to finally reach a series that I really truly enjoyed, and that was the Blood of Eden series by Julie Kagawa. I talked about this book series in my very first video, so I won't talk about it too much here. If you would like to see that video, I'll leave a link below. A very quick recap of the story is that it's a post-apocalyptic vampire series. It takes place in a world that's been ravaged by this horrible virus where a lot of humans died and now vampires rule. And it follows this girl who absolutely hates vampires, but very soon into the first book she becomes a vampire. I promise it's not spoilery because it's listed on the back of the book with the description. But very soon into the first book she becomes a vampire. She becomes the thing she hates the most. And the whole story just follows her learning how to be a vampire, navigating what it's like to have relationships as a vampire. And then, of course, most importantly, saving the world, because that always has to happen, right? I really enjoyed this series a lot. Probably the only thing I didn't enjoy quite as much is the romance story in it. It's the vampire and human romance thing, which is very Twilight-y. There's no way to get away from that, I think, to think of Twilight when you think of that. But it was really well done. The romance was really well done in that respect, and the story was really well done, and it was really exciting and really fun, and I couldn't put them down. The villains in the story, too, were just fantastic. They were really fun to read, and so this is a really great series. I recommend it. It is very violent. There is some language as well, but it's really fun to read. And then, after that, I gave myself a little bit of book whiplash and I skipped to a completely different genre and I started reading One Beautiful Dream by Jennifer Fulwiler. This book is one that my grandmother had given me for Mother's Day. I talked about this book in my very first video as well, so I won't go into it way too much, but I really enjoyed this book a lot. It's an inspirational book, and Jennifer just writes about what her experience was about writing her very first book in the throes of motherhood and having little kids and continually having little kids. She felt called to have a big family, and so she just wanted to keep following her dreams though and write a book even though she was in the middle of that, and that it was okay to follow those dreams. And I'm still learning that right now and trying to accept that reality that yes, I can pursue things that I really want to do even though I have a small child. But this was a really great book. I highly recommend reading it. It was a lot of fun to read and very inspirational. The next book out after that, I kind of went into my comfort zone when it comes to kind of creepy books, and this one had been on my list for a very long time to read and I finally got around to reading it, and that is Seer of Shadows. Yes, I have to say it that way. It's by Avi. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's A-V-I is how it's spelled. It was a fun book. It was creepy. It was very short and a fun read. I will say that it was not one of my favorites. There were portions of it that were kind of slow and then portions of it that should have been slowed down and taken more time, and it was really fast. But overall it was a really good book. So the basic story of this book is it follows a boy who is 14 years old in the late 1800s. He is learning how to be a photographer. So a lot of the book kind of describes the different processing for film and all that kind of thing. When he finally is allowed to start taking pictures with the camera, he realizes that every time he takes a picture, there's someone else in the picture that's not supposed to be there, and basically every time he takes a picture, an apparition appears, and he finds out that every time he takes a picture, the apparition becomes more and more realistic and more solid until that apparition actually finally fully exists in our world. And as luck would have it, the apparition that he ends up bringing back to this world is a little girl who's bent on murdering people. So it's a lot of fun. It's really creepy. There's only two things that I wasn't a huge fan of in this book, and the first one was the ending. It had so much build up in the story, and then it got to the end and it was done just really quickly. It was like this epic boss battle and you're like, yes, finally, it's gonna get really cool, and then it gets there and it's over like really fast, and I'm like, that's it? That's all you're giving me? And then after that it goes to a prologue, which was interesting. It was fun to read what happens with these characters years and years later, But the problem is that the story ends on a cliffhanger. A cliffhanger. There's not gonna be another one of these. There isn't another one. They ended it on a cliffhanger. What are you doing? So that was really frustrating for me. I was like, why would you do that to me? But it was a fun, quick little creepy read. It was an easy read for me to just relax and have fun reading something just a little bit creepy. So it was a fun book, but I probably won't be reading it again. And if you just want like a fun, little, easy read, I would go for it. But yeah, it was good. This next book is one, again, I had been wanting to read for a long time. I've been going back to my earliest books on my Goodreads list and trying to kind of tackle those because so many of them have been sitting there for years and I've really been wanting to read them. So this book is Peter Nimble and His Fantastic Eyes by Jonathan Auxier. Ever since I read The Night Gardener by Jonathan Auxier, I was dying to read more of his work. So this particular book really excited me because I was looking forward to jumping back into his writing, and I did really enjoy this book a lot. It was a lot of fun. It did go in a direction that I wasn't expecting, but before I talk about that, the general idea of this book is it follows Peter Nimble. He's blind and he becomes the greatest thief ever. He lives in sort of this Oliver Twist kind of like world. Think like that Victorian London, old school kind of thing, and he becomes this master thief. He's an orphan, but the person who's taking care of him takes advantage of that and basically makes him steal and makes him do bad things, and he's not proud of it and he doesn't want to do it, but he's made to do it. And he's also just treated really badly. His master is just really cruel to him and calls him names and basically tells him that he's worthless. And then eventually one day he basically gets jettisoned off into this fantastical fairy tale-ish kind of world that he didn't know existed, and he has to go and save this kingdom that he's never heard of. It's a really fun book. It's a really cute book. I had a really hard time with the direction the book went to. So when I first started reading this book, again, it was set in this Victorian London-ish type setting. It's just sort of this Oliver Twist feel and him just being this pickpocket thief kind of thing, and I was set in this world and I was enjoying it. And all of a sudden he was sent off into this more fantastical world, and I didn't know that was coming, and so I was really thrown off by it, and I had trouble making that switch in my head. I don't know why, but I just did. So because of that, I felt really disconnected to the characters and the story for a while because I was having trouble grasping the direction that it was going. And then the other part, which I still think is really funny to think about, is that one of the characters they threw in there that ended up becoming the sidekick of Peter Nimble, and I loved this character, but he's supposed to be a knight, but he's been cursed by a hag to be a mix of a cat and a horse. And when I read that, my brain, it didn't compute. I couldn't think of what that was supposed to look like in my head. I was like, what is that? And I had so much trouble just putting that together in my brain. That's one of the things I love the most about reading, is just the amazing gift God's given us for our imagination, and about how we're able to read words on a page and then we're able to picture the characters and the places in our head and being able to vision that and see it. And it's one of the most amazing things I think about reading, and it's what I love about it so much. But this was one of the first times I read something and my brain was like, huh? How do I piece this together? And finally, thankfully, Jonathan Auxier has little illustrations at the top of every single chapter, and finally there were some chapters that had glimpses of what that character looked like, so I had more of an idea. So it's supposed to be a cat with hooves of a horse, which is a really funny thing to think about, and I had a really hard time just grasping that too. I sound like I had a hard time with this book, but I did really enjoy it. My very favorite thing about this book was the message, and that's something I've noticed with Jonathan Auxier with a lot of his books so far, is that he likes to have a moral or a message in his books. And this one I think is such a wonderful message, not only for kids, just for anybody. Don't take yourself at face value. You are worth more than you know, and you are capable of so much more than you think you can do. And that's basically what Peter Nimble learns throughout this whole book. He starts out just feeling worthless and has been told his whole life is worthless. And then all of a sudden he's being told, you can be a hero, you can do great things. And it just changes his whole world and his whole perspective about life. And it was a really cool message, and I really enjoyed that a lot. This last book that I've read so far, from the beginning of the year all the way to the end of June, I actually haven't finished yet. I'm really close to finishing it. But I'm going to go ahead and include it because it fits with the last one I talked about, and that one is Sophie, Quire and the Last Storyguard. It's also by Jonathan Auxier, and it's connected with the Peter Nimble series. It has Peter Nimble in it as well as a lot of the other characters from the first book, but I am enjoying this one so much. Sophie Quire, that main character, she reminds me a lot of myself, and she also she gives a lot of good hints of like Hermione Granger, which I just love because she's one of my favorite literary characters of all time. This story follows Sophie Quire, and she is a daughter of a bookseller and book mender, and she's living in this town where basically they're trying to get rid of all nonsense. They're gathering up all the storybooks in the city, and they're creating this huge pile, and they created this holiday called Pyre Day to where they're just going to set them all on fire. And of course that just breaks Sophie's heart, and she just really hates to see all those books destroyed. And through the story she ends up finding out she's what's called a Storyguard, where she's supposed to be protecting stories, which also protects the magic in the world. And she ends up going off in this quest to find these specific books that will help her be able to stop the people who are trying to destroy all the stories in the world and try to destroy all the magic in the world. It also has the same kind of theme that Peter Nimble does, where she ends up finding a lot about herself through the story, that she is so much more than what she thought she was. She thought that she was too small, not important enough of a person to be able to do anything and make a difference, and she finds that she can, and it empowers her, and I just love that. I love seeing that these characters grow and find out there's so much more than what they thought. So it's a beautiful story, and I'm really enjoying both of these books, and they're so empowering, and I love it, and I think it's a great message for kids as well as adults. Thank you so much for watching this video. If there are any books that I listed that you have read or you have any comments on them, please comment below. I would love to get that conversation started, and I would love to talk with you. If you like this video, please do a little book boop on the like icon. I would really appreciate it. And if you really liked what you saw, please subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you can get notifications whenever I post new videos. But thanks again so much for watching. You are more than you know, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!